Hello, I'm Duncan, and today we're going to be giving a presentation on drug legislation. And it's going to be a persuasive presentation. So, first, we should talk about how I selected my topic. I selected my topic by looking simply at the assignment sheet she gave us. That assignment sheet had a variety of broad concepts, some of which applied to our class, some didn't. I looked at those and I picked out three general ones which I thought might be an interesting topic for our class, which is state of the family, drugs, and terrorism. And of course, as you can see by the crudely done arrow on this PowerPoint here, I have chosen drugs. I narrowed the argument down, of course, because I can't give a full presentation on drugs. There would be too much to cover in that. So we just narrowed it down to drug legislation because that's been a hot issue as of recently. And I chose this topic because it's also a topic that I'm not too familiar with. I don't do drugs, and I haven't looked into drug legislation in the past. So my proposition, drug legislation has recently come into question because nobody really knows how to define a drug. Nobody knows what addiction or abuse is, although there are general guidelines set out in the DSM-5. But of course, how accurate could those be? Those are always case-by-case examples, which could obviously go against that. And then the ultimate question is, what really should be legal? Why is smoking a little weed illegal, whereas smoking methamphetamine isn't? So I just thought that drug legislation should be maintained as it is, but more help should be offered to those who are suffering. So my ultimate proposition would be the penalty for possession and distribution of drugs should remain the same, and more help should be offered to those who struggle with addiction or abuse of illegal drugs. Now, with research into this topic, I stumbled upon the Australian Institute of Criminology. The Australian Institute of Criminology established a study in 2011 on the effectiveness of legislation on drugs. The data here was collected based on the arrests made and the seizures made of the drugs. And they modeled ideal drug markets from the data they received from the criminal investigations. And as you can see, the two models here, the first model is without legislation, and the second model is with legislation. The number of seizures would remain the same, arrests about remain the same as well, but the purity, availability would go skyrocketing as the technology increases and people become more and more aware of how to make drugs. Deaths and hospital stays would therefore increase because people would be more available to get drugs and harder drugs at it, and people wouldn't really question what's in their drug, and people could lace it with all kinds of things. But the public perception of the drug problem would obviously go up because they'd see more and more deaths. The second there is when we remain the same and we have the legislation we have here in the United States. The number of seizures obviously went up. The arrests obviously went up because legislation has changed and people are able to be arrested for things they weren't being able to before. So the purity, because all the drug dealers are going to be arrested, well, not all of them, I should say, but most of them are going to be arrested. And then they would also be scared off by the threat of law to make the process a little bit quicker in trying to make the drugs, just to fit all that demand with less suppliers. So therefore, the purity would go down and the availability would go down. With this, the amount of deaths would go down and the hospital stays would go down, but the public perception of the drug problem would stay about the same. They would see that drugs are still an issue because of all the education they've received as a child. So, coupled with the intense legislation that we have now, if we couple in the help with those who are suffering, we can ultimately reduce, if not completely dissolve, the drug war that we have today. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you guys soon.